Good afternoon. I'm Glenn Burgess. I'm at the British Columbia Wildfire Service. I'm the incident commander here at the Okanagan complex. And my incident management team arrived yesterday, and we assumed command of the fires in this complex this morning. Obviously, there's been a lot of activity in the last few days, and I do want to kind of frame this a little bit that any activity or actions that occurred prior to today I was not in control of, and I can't necessarily speak to what occurred and did not occur. So we have specific questions about what occurred in the days leading up to today. You can call the Kamloops Fire Center and they can provide you with some backup information. What I can tell you in general though is when these fires occurred, the Kamloops Fire Center, in conjunction with the Penticton Fire Zone, we sent all available resources to respond, as well in conjunction with the local governments and the fire departments locally. That's where the initial response came from. And so we did commit as many resources as were available and continue to commit more as time goes on. So today, as I said, we took command and are beginning to manage these incidents. I believe we are running currently about 14 different incidents within the complex, basically from Penticton to Peachland or West Kelowna, kind of up to that far. So all the fires you kind of see along the Okanagan corridor. They range in size from small initial attack fires, which would have a 3-person crew, to the larger fires that are obviously consuming a lot more resources, energy, and concern for the public. We have a lot of resources, in excess of 200 ground crew, approximately 20 rotary wing aircraft working in bucket support operations, as well as availability of fixed wing air tankers. And for the most part, we're not at a situation where we're not able to get resources. It's just the timing to get resources. BC's a large province, and the resources come from all over the place. And so it just takes time. We're asking for resources, the resources are coming, and we're deploying them on the fire line into the priority areas. So we're actually had a lot of support that way. It's working quite well. And as we begin to get more structured and organized in the coming days, we'll get better information out, better maps, all that kind of information that people are demanding, better updates. The single biggest thing we're working on now is enhancing communications and making sure that all our partners and clients and stakeholders are getting the information they need, whether it's local governments, First Nations, fire departments, yourself, the media, local communities. We just really want to make sure that accurate, timely information is getting out as best we can. I don't have a lot of intel or information on specific incidents. I can speak about some of them in general. Again, I just took over today. My staff are out there, but I certainly can talk a little bit about, our strategies are to protect life and property is our number one priority. So our resources are being prioritized based on that. So some sections of some fires may not be getting a lot of resources because they're in the areas where the homes and the values and those kinds of pieces are. Weather today, although you wouldn't believe it right now, is slightly cooler. The humidities are a little higher, which is actually somewhat favorable for us. As well, the winds have shifted, and you can feel and see the smoke is different. It's coming a little more from the north, which is changing fire behavior a little bit, as well as moving the smoke out of the larger centers and pushing it south. And in some respects will then push the fires back onto themselves a little bit as well. So we are making very good headway in a lot of areas, particularly in areas where the terrain allows us to. As you can see from the valleys around us, there's a lot of very steep, rocky terrain, which causes problems. And the other priority for us is obviously to try to keep the highway corridor open to allow traffic flow. And at the end of the day, we don't control whether the highway gets closed or not closed. We work with our partner agencies on that and try to minimize that impact as much as possible. And again, try to minimize impact of all of this on the public in general. And appreciative of the fact of the summer season and the tourism and all that stuff. So, we're doing a lot of great work. We've made a lot of great progress over those last couple of days. And but there's still a lot of fire out there on the landscape, and we still have a lot of work to do. And and we're really just getting organized and getting structured and doing the best we can given the resources and the continuing inflow of resources. So it's sort of in general kind of what we're up to, and I'm certainly willing to answer specific questions as best I can at this point. Okay.
Lake fire, is that a threat?
Yeah, there is several fires in close proximity, and late yesterday with the winds we were getting, it looked like there was a chance those fires could merge. They did not merge, and this morning when we were out there, we were hopeful that they wouldn't. Sometimes fires merging isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just, well, I don't know the specifics. It depends on the values that's in between. Obviously, if there was high priority values in between, then it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing. If it's just two fires moving together, sometimes that actually can be advantageous to us because it reduces the amount of perimeter we need to work with. So, but those fires have not merged yet, and we're working to try to hope that they don't merge.
Is that a major concern?
It's not a major concern. It's quite frankly, it's just something we have to manage. It's another risk. Yeah.
You mentioned communications several times. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on what's happened the past week with communications maybe not being up to snuff?
Yeah, and again, that was before I got here. Functionally, what occurs is the communications were being done as best they could with the limited resources. And so when we have emerging incidents like this and we have limited staff, they have to prioritize where their energies are, and the local staff's energies were on response and organizing response, which unfortunately creates a bit of an information void. And that's where the fire center steps in to try and help with that. But again, the fire center's in Kamloops, and so they're not local. And so it can create gaps in that, and certainly that's something we're aware of and we're trying to improve, absolutely. And sometimes it's just a function of how rapidly things change and evolve. And while we try to get accurate, timely information out as quick as we can, in a rapidly evolving, by the time we produce a map and put it out, it could literally be 2 kilometers out of date. And so we try to stay ahead of it, but it's difficult.
Can you say why? Maybe the preparations weren't in? There seemed to be a lack of preparation. Can you talk about that one?
No, that was before my time. Again, we committed all available resources at the time, and it always comes down to how many resources do we have alerted available at any given point in the province at any given time? And we do the best we can on anticipated weather and what we think is going to occur, and we do the best we can, and sometimes it's not enough, and that's just the reality.
Any update for residents who are wondering when they're going to be able to be informed?
Yeah, and so we assess the status of evacuation alerts and orders on a daily basis. We don't actually put alerts and orders in place. We make recommendation to the local government, whether it's a regional district, a municipality, or an Indigenous community. They have the legal authority to enact, and so we just communicate with them and recommend based on what we expect the fire behavior and the movement to be. And so, again, it's something we look at every single day and make recommendations, and it's up to them to do it. So at this point, I can't say that we're going to make a change in status to any of the alerts or orders. And that's something we assess typically at the end of a day to say, okay, how's things gone? Where are we at? Can we make a recommendation on the status change?
Any update on the number of people affected? The last number we heard was around 1,500 who are affected by evacuation alerts.
Yeah, you would have to get that from the regional districts. Again, we don't track that. We just sort of communicate and make a recommendation. And as far as the number of addresses or homes, that's their information they would have.
So you wouldn't have a number, I guess, on the number of structures. Last we heard there was 0 a few hours ago. Is that still 0 as far as you know for homes impacted by wildfire?
To the best of my knowledge, we have not had any homes or structures impacted negatively by the fire.
Did the fire jump Highway 97 on the NES Mountain? And was Greater Ranch affected?
The fire is on both sides of the highway at a point. As far as we know, no properties as far as structures were affected, but yes, the fire definitely got below the highway at a few spots along Highway 97.
They say, people who have lived in this community for decades, who deal with fires every year, they feel like the alert was a joke and that it caused
Yeah, and again, I don't know how or when that alert went on and what were the circumstances. I think what happens a lot of times, particularly late in the day, as the sun sets and nighttime comes, fire can look a lot more dramatic and dangerous than it really is. And again, local governments make the decision with the best information they have, with the safety of their people in mind. And yeah, it may seem like an overreaction, but had they not done it and something else occurred, then we'd be having a different conversation. So I think that's important to recognize, is really at night, things are going to look worse than they sometimes are, but we always put public safety as the top priority, and so the governments aren't going to take a chance on it.
Can you talk about what is the rate on the Mount Elias fire with respect to going directly to evacuation notices as opposed to alerts?
I wasn't involved in that decision at all, so it wouldn't be fair for me to speak to that.
I know you guys have about 204 provincial firefighters that are going to be coming back next week from Quebec and Ontario. Are there, and I know, in BC, the wildfire situation wasn't as bad as other provinces really all season until this week. So are there any resources that the BC Wildfire Service is asking for from other provinces?
No, at this point, as far as I'm aware, we have not requested outside help. And in fact, even resources, when we deploy them to other agencies, Quebec or Ontario, for example, we actually have the ability to recall them before their tour is up, should we need them. So we're not at the point where we are out of resources. We're continuing to request them. They're showing up. It's just a matter of time of getting here. So yeah, we're not at that point where we're like, thinking about bringing them back early. I think we're anticipating them coming home and them resetting, taking some days off, and then them being available to come back out and help.
We've heard that the Penticton airport beside us might also be closed for, traffic tanker, choppers and whatnot fighting these fires. Is it closed right now? Do you know anything about that?
No, we don't close airports for our use. If it gets to the point where we have that much activity, then we'll look to go other way. I mean, obviously there's a substantial commercial flights and those kinds of things. We actually don't get to close the airport for our convenience. We work in and around and work with them. And so yeah, we're certainly not having that conversation at this point.
Can you comment on any criticism regarding the response to the Good Creek fire?
Yeah, so the Good Creek fire obviously is a little bit tricky, and I think part of the concern there is that people are reliving the past a little bit with that fire, and rightly so. The reality is the fuel type there is completely different than what it has been in the past. It's no longer standing timber. It was severely burnt a number of years ago, and the fuel type has changed. And while the fire's moving around and expanding there, it's not moving with any great spread. And in fact, yesterday the fire never advanced at all to the north, which is towards the community of Kelowna. And we had crews there. We had a lot of air support. So I think at the end of the day, we need to prioritize our resources where the actual high-risk values are threatened. And at that time, there was no high-risk values immediately threatened there versus some of the other fires. And that's just part of what we do. With a limited resource, we have to put them where the immediate threat is.
When you're talking about high-risk values, you're talking about homes, businesses, towns. What do you?
Correct. Yeah. What we would call our number one priority values, that life, property, those types of values versus protecting some burning trees. Those are what we're prioritizing, those high-risk values and the government infrastructure kinds of things, important cellular networks, power lines, like all those things kind of fall into those upper two tiers of priorities. And so that fire at the time wasn't threatening any of those values, so the resources were elsewhere.
So what do you say to residents who are, some of them are fearful, some of them are super frustrated with the response at this point? What do you tell them?
Well, we tell them exactly what I just said. We have to make the decision to put our resources where we're going to protect our greatest risk. And that's not always what they want to hear, because to them, their home is the greatest risk, and they see a fire 2 or 3 miles away, and to them, they think it is at risk. We look at that and suggest, well, based on what we know about weather and topography and fire behavior, we don't feel that risk is imminent, and we do have risk elsewhere. And again, if we had unlimited resources, we would go after everything all at once. We just don't. We just don't have that capacity.
So when you look at the weather today, the wind, fire behavior, what is the biggest challenge right now?
Yeah, the biggest challenge now is that the wind has shifted direction, and so it's coming from the north. And so all of our planning and our activities have been based on the more traditional southwesterly winds. And so things have changed. It hasn't necessarily created a challenge. In fact, it's beneficial in a certain amount of areas. So it's just allowed us to change our focus a bit. One of the more significant challenges for us is what we call the downslope winds that occur at night. And significant in this valley. And so at night, when it's dark and we don't have resources out there because it's dangerous, we're getting fire spread downslope. And again, at night, in the dark, strong winds, those are all things that they look really bad and they can potentially be really bad, but we have very limited options in the dark, unfortunately. So that's the big win, and that happens every day. It's predictable. We know it's going to happen, and we try to manage as best we can around
No
that.
significant rain in sight.
As far as we know, the rain is not coming this far south.
No significant fire growth in Mount Eneas overnight last night, or was there some growth?
I would imagine there was some growth, but I guess the term significant. Yeah, there was some growth. We didn't lose any structures. I don't think it did anything we hadn't anticipated. To give you a number as far as hectares of growth, I couldn't give you that, but yeah.
And have the winds been a particular problem on that fire? Hearing from the meteorologists is what they call hand-rain factor.
Yeah, the winds come out of the valleys there and split and do some crazy things. Again, we're sort of aware of it, but the winds have absolutely been a challenge for us there. The last few days, extremely hot, extremely low relative humidities make the fuel susceptible, and then you add wind and slope, and you have the ideal burning conditions for fire to spread rapidly, and that's exactly what we faced there.
What's your biggest fear at this stage?
Honestly, I guess my biggest fear would be an unpredicted or unforeseen weather event. And right now we're fairly comfortable, and we saw that happen quite a bit to us last year, to be honest. Cold front passages and those kinds of things. That's not predicted for us. We hope that we're okay with that. But those are the kinds of things that can really disrupt our operational planning and kind of have to make us change plans radically quickly. And it also puts our people at risk. And while I talk about our number one priority being human life and property, that includes our own human lives. And the risk to our responders is always something. And so, that's something we need to manage. And when we get unexpected or radical weather changes, it puts our people at risk. And that's obviously a concern.
In your career, sir, have you ever seen 10 minutes of lightning cause 9 major fires in half an hour?
Unfortunately, I have, yes. So, if we reflect back to 2003, there was a lightning event in 2003 in the area I worked in. We got 87 fires in one 24-hour period, of which many went to that big. The difference was there wasn't communities and homes threatened. It was a bit more isolated. So this was a little bit unique from that circumstance for sure. And it's a function of, of the fire season we're beginning to see. That's just the reality. Times are changing for us, and we're doing the best we can to respond to that. Yeah.
Are you able to comment on, I know you guys have it updated daily with the number of hectares burned, but are you able to run that by us? And do you have any idea how much has been spent on the BC Wildfire Service so far this year?
Yeah, I don't have that information. I know we do roll it up and report it pretty much on a daily basis, and we can certainly get you that information, but I don't have it at my fingertips, no.
Do you have an update on how many fires are currently burning, how many hectares?
No, not even in this area, other than the area I'm in charge of, which is about 14 fires provincially, or even in the fire counts fires. I don't know. Again, we can get that information for you, but I don't have it. No.
Eneas is still the one that poses the biggest threat to right?
Yeah, there's a couple of fires that still have created concerns and issues with threats to populated areas. Yeah, but that's obviously the biggest, most visible, having the largest impact at this point. Yeah.
Maybe you've touched on this, but what's been the most challenging thing, as far as for provincial firefighters this week of the fires they've faced in the Okanagan? Is it the Mount Eneas wildfire and the fact that It encroached on the highway and some homes in the North Summerland area of Garnet Valley there.
I think that one of the biggest challenges, honestly, I mean, all these fires were very similar in that respect, is terrain. The reality is we can't work on every piece of terrain. Extremely steep, unstable slopes, rocks, falling debris, those all create issues for us. And it can be frustrating to see a fire that we think we could just go get, but if it's not safe to do so, we can't do it. And so, as you drive through that, you see the cliffs and the rock bluffs, and you think about that, like, we can't put people there. So we have to kind of work where we can, and that is a challenge, and quite honestly, can be frustrating for us to have to kind of accept that we can't just go do it all the time. No, at this point, we've had no significant injuries, and I think that's something that we're very proud of. And even last year, we had an extremely low injury rate per person hour worked in some highly volatile fires, and that is something we take very seriously, is the protection and the safety of our workers. And obviously, like everybody else, we're bound by safe work, Work Safe BC, and those are all things that we factor into everything we do, and that's where the challenge comes for us, is balancing that safety against getting work done on the hillside.